In the summer of 1823, a mountain man named Hugh Glass found himself deep in the untamed wilderness of what is now South Dakota. There were no roads, no towns, no doctors, no rescue teams, only endless forests, rivers, and some of the most dangerous predators in North America. What happened to Hugh Glass that year would become one of the most incredible survival stories ever recorded. A story so unbelievable that many people refused to believe it was true. Because after suffering injuries that should have killed any man, Hugh Glass somehow survived. And then he did something even more remarkable. He began crawling. Not for a few hours, not for a day, but for weeks. Alone, across hundreds of miles of wilderness, all because he refused to die. Before we get to the bear attack itself, it's important to understand the kind of man Hugh Glass was. The American frontier in the early 19th century was one of the harshest places on Earth. Mountain men and fur trappers traveled through lands that few Europeans had ever seen. A simple mistake could mean starvation. A broken leg often meant death. And every day brought the possibility of attack from animals, disease, accidents, or hostile encounters. Hugh Glass was no stranger to danger. By 1823, he had already lived a life full of adventure and hardship. Stories about his early years vary, but many accounts suggest that he had survived encounters with pirates, storms, and years of frontier living. Whether every detail is true or not, one thing is certain. Glass had developed a reputation as a tough and experienced woodsman, and he would need every bit of that experience. In 1823, Hugh Glass joined a fur trapping expedition led by General William Ashley. The expedition's goal was simple: travel deep into the wilderness, collect valuable beaver pelts, and return with a fortune. But life on the frontier rarely followed simple plans. The men traveled through territory that was wild, dangerous, and largely unexplored. Every day required caution. Every river crossing carried risk. Every distant sound in the trees demanded attention. Yet despite all these dangers, none of the men expected what was waiting for Hugh Glass. One morning, while scouting ahead of the main group, Glass moved quietly through thick brush. The forest seemed calm. Birds called from the trees. The wind barely moved the leaves. Everything appeared normal. Then he heard a sound, a low growl, not far away. Before he could react, a massive grizzly bear exploded from the brush. The animal was likely protecting her cubs. And in that moment, Hugh Glass had no chance to escape. The bear slammed into him with incredible force. Glass fired his rifle. But it wasn't enough. The grizzly knocked him to the ground. Then the attack began. Witnesses later described a horrifying scene. The bear bit into his flesh. Its claws ripped through his back, shoulders, and scalp. Glass fought desperately, using his knife, his hands, anything he could. But a full-grown grizzly can weigh several hundred kilograms. Against such power, even the strongest man is nearly helpless. The attack seemed endless. The men from the expedition heard the commotion and rushed toward the scene. By the time they arrived, Glass was barely recognizable. His body was covered in blood. His wounds were catastrophic. The bear eventually retreated after being shot by the other trappers, but the damage had already been done. The men gathered around Hugh Glass. Most believed they were looking at a dead man. Others thought he would survive only a few more hours. No one imagined he would ever walk again. The expedition now faced a difficult problem. Glass was alive, but barely, and moving him through the wilderness slowed everyone down. Day after day the group carried him, but progress became painfully slow. The wilderness showed no mercy. Supplies were limited. Danger surrounded them. Eventually the expedition leader made a decision. 2 men would stay behind with Hugh Glass. Their job was simple: wait until he died, then bury him, and catch up with the expedition. The 2 volunteers were John Fitzgerald and a young man named Jim Bridger. At first they remained with him, but days passed, and Hugh Glass refused to die. His breathing continued. His heart kept beating, and the 2 men became increasingly nervous. Rumors spread that hostile warriors might be nearby. The wilderness felt more dangerous every day. Then they made a choice that would define the rest of their lives. Instead of waiting, they abandoned him. They took his rifle, his knife, many of his supplies, and left him alone. A dying man in the middle of the American wilderness. When Hugh Glass finally regained full consciousness, he discovered something terrifying. Everyone was gone. He was alone. Badly wounded. Unable to walk. Without weapons. Without food. Without hope. At least that's what most people would have thought. But Hugh Glass was not most people. And this was only the beginning of his journey. In the summer of 1823, somewhere deep in the wilderness of what is now South Dakota, a man was torn apart by a grizzly bear. The attack lasted only a few moments. But those moments changed everything. The bear crushed his ribs. It ripped open his back. Its claws tore deep into his flesh. When the animal finally wandered away, the man lay motionless in the grass. His companions believed he would be dead before sunset. No doctor could reach him. No settlement was nearby. No rescue was coming. The nearest fort was more than 200 miles away, and yet somehow he survived. Not only did he survive, he crawled across some of the harshest wilderness in North America, alone, wounded, starving, and driven by a determination that few men have ever possessed. His name was Hugh Glass, and this is one of the most extraordinary survival stories ever recorded.